Yo, book buddy. Okay, I have a completely serious question. Who gave authors permission to end every single chapter like they're trying to ruin perfectly responsible adults? Because last night, I did what every reader confidently says they'll do. I looked at the clock, looked at the book, and said, one more chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a lie. A complete, absolute, beautiful lie. Because somehow, one more chapter turned into me sitting in bed at 2:14 in the morning, staring at my ceiling. I could literally feel the trap. Every chapter ended, and my brain went, okay, now you can stop. The book had other plans. Coffee ready? Good, because I seriously need to talk about this one.
Coffee ready? Good, because I need to talk.
So, the book. The Divorce by Freida McFadden. Now, before I even tell you what it's about, I need to ask you something. Have you ever met someone who smiled at you, said all the right things, and somehow your brain still whispered, yeah, I'm not buying it? That's the energy this book lives on. Not monsters, not explosions, not endless action scenes. Just that tiny little voice in the back of your head that refuses to trust anyone that do that. Because they don't scare you with what's happening, they scare you with what might be happening. And that's exactly why this book grabbed me way faster than I expected. Without spoiling anything, here's literally all you need to know. A marriage is falling apart. Questions start piling up. People begin hiding things. And before you know it, you're sitting there looking at every single character like you've somehow been promoted to full-time detective. Except you're a terrible detective, because every 10 pages, I'd confidently point at someone and go, it's them. 5 minutes later, nope. At one point, I genuinely stopped trying to solve it. I was like, you know what, Freida, you win. I'll just sit here, drink my coffee, and let you emotionally confuse me. And that's when I started enjoying it even more. Okay, can we talk about Naomi for a second? Naomi, sweetheart, I was on your side. I really was. I wanted things to work out for you. I wanted to believe you. I wanted to protect you. But there were moments where I genuinely wanted to climb into the book, pull up a chair, slide a cup of coffee across the table and say, okay, let's make today's decisions together. Because every now and then, she'd do something, and I'd just slowly close the book, look at the wall, and whisper, Naomi. Not because she's badly written. Actually, the complete opposite. She feels like a real person who's scared, trying to make sense of impossible situations. And sometimes, real people make frustrating decisions. That's what made her feel believable to me. She isn't perfect. She isn't trying to be. And honestly, I'm glad. Because perfect characters are boring. messy characters, they're the ones I can't stop thinking about. And then there's Jeremy. Buddy, you made me suspicious before you even finished introducing yourself. I don't even know how you managed that. Every time you appeared, my brain immediately went, And that's one of my favorite things about this book. It somehow convinced me that literally everybody was hiding something. Every conversation felt slightly off. Every smile felt like it came with a question mark. And before I realized it, I wasn't reading anymore. I was investigating. The problem? I was a terrible detective. Absolutely terrible. I changed my theory every few chapters. At one point, I was so confident I actually said out loud, "I've figured this book out." Reader, I had not. I became suspicious of people for absolutely no reason. Someone would simply walk into a room and my brain would go, that's exactly what a guilty person would do. This book had me questioning everyone, including people who were probably just trying to have a normal conversation. And honestly, that's exactly the kind of psychological thriller I enjoy. Not because it's constantly shouting, "Look, twist," but because it quietly sits beside you and whispers, "Are you sure?" And suddenly, you're not sure about anything anymore. You know what this book did? It cheated. Not in the story. I mean, it cheated me. Because every single time I thought I'd finally settled into the story, Freida would casually drop one tiny little detail, and suddenly my entire detective board looked completely useless. You know those crime movies where the detective has a wall covered in photos, red string everywhere, looking incredibly confident? That was me. Except my wall would have been completely wrong every single time. And here's the scary part. The book doesn't force you to keep reading. It tempts you. There's a difference. It doesn't scream, "Read the next chapter." It quietly smiles, ends on one suspicious sentence, and lets your own curiosity do the rest. That's dangerous. Because curiosity is expensive. It costs sleep. At one point, I actually closed the book. I even put it on the table. I looked at it, took a sip of coffee, and thought, good, I'm done for tonight. The book just sat there. Didn't move, didn't say anything, but somehow, 5 minutes later, it was back in my hands. I don't even remember picking it up. And that's when I realized I wasn't reading because I needed answers anymore. I was reading because I couldn't stand not knowing. There's a difference. One is curiosity, the other is obsession. This book made me suspicious of completely normal behavior. Someone would answer a question politely, and I'd immediately think, that's exactly what someone hiding something would say. By the middle of the book, I wasn't trusting anybody. Not because the book told me not to, because it trained me not to. And honestly, I have to give it credit for that. That's clever writing. The thing I appreciated most was that the tension doesn't come from loud moments. It comes from doubt, from second guessing, from tiny details that make you pause and think, wait, did I miss something? And before you know it, you're flipping back a few pages just to check one conversation. Not because you're confused, Because the book has convinced you everything might matter. And I love thrillers that respect their readers like that. They don't just hand you surprises, they invite you to play along. Even if you lose every single time. You know what's funny? When I first picked up The Divorce, I thought I was signing up for a thriller. You know, mysteries, suspects, plot twists, the usual. And yes, it's all there. But somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't just turning pages to find out who did it. I was asking something completely different. Who can I actually trust? Because that's what this book kept doing to me. It wasn't just building suspense. It was quietly reminding me how fragile trust really is. How one lie can make you question 10 truths. How one secret can suddenly change the way you look at someone you've known for years. And honestly, that's the part that stayed with me, not the mystery, the feeling. There were moments where I finished a chapter, didn't immediately start the next one, and just sat there. Coffee in one hand, book in the other, thinking, wow, because the story wasn't asking me to solve a crime anymore. It was asking me, how well do we ever really know another person? And that's a much scarier question, because there isn't an easy answer. I think that's why psychological thrillers work so well. They don't make you afraid of monsters. They make you afraid of ordinary people, ordinary conversations, ordinary moments. And suddenly, ordinary doesn't feel so ordinary anymore. And don't worry, I'm not saying this book changed my life. I still slept just fine, eventually. But it definitely made me pause a couple of times and think, that was clever. And I really appreciate books that can do that without needing hundreds of pages of explanation. So, after I closed the book, I wasn't thinking about one big twist. I was thinking about how easily certainty disappears. One conversation, one secret, one missing piece, and suddenly, everything looks different. And honestly, I think that's the best compliment I can give a thriller. Not that it shocked me, but that it stayed with me after I put it back on the shelf. So, would I recommend The Divorce? Honestly, yeah, I really would. But not for everyone. If you're someone who loves slow, beautiful, character-driven literary fiction, this might not be your cup of coffee. This book isn't trying to be poetic. It's trying to keep you awake. And honestly, it succeeds. If you love psychological thrillers, where you're constantly questioning people, changing your theories, and convincing yourself you've cracked the mystery, only to realize, reader, you had not, then I think you'll have a really good time with this one. I'm giving The Divorce 4.5 coffees out of 5. Not because it's perfect, because it delivered exactly the experience it promised. It kept me curious, it kept me guessing, and most importantly, it kept me reading. Sometimes that's exactly what I want from a thriller. You know, every now and then, you finish a book, close the cover, and almost immediately start thinking about the next one. This wasn't one of those books. I actually sat there for a while. Coffee was cold, the room was quiet, and I found myself replaying little moments in my head. Not because I was trying to solve anything anymore, but because the story had quietly stayed with me. I always think that's a good sign, when a book keeps talking to you, even after you've stopped reading it. Anyway, that's enough of me talking. Now I want to hear from you. If you've already read The Divorce, don't spoil anything. Seriously. But tell me this. When was the exact moment you realized, okay, I'm finishing this book today? I genuinely want to know. And if you haven't read it yet, I'd love to hear something else. Did this conversation make you curious enough to add it to your TBR? Let me know. I read every comment, especially the ones that make my TBR even more out of control. All right, I'm gonna go refill my coffee and maybe, just maybe, pick up another book that's going to destroy my sleep schedule. Again. Until next time, keep your coffee warm, keep your bookmark nearby, and remember, life's too short to read books you don't enjoy. This is the BookBuddy, signing off. Love, books, coffee.